Hello there. Well, I've decided to take a break from talking about members of the governing body and being juvenile with members of the governing body, and just talk about what Jehovah's Witnesses themselves believe, what Jehovah's Witnesses teach, because I think it's important to focus on that, because probably there will be people watching my channel who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses but who are perhaps curious about what Jehovah's Witnesses teach, what they believe. Perhaps you've got work colleagues who are Jehovah's Witnesses. Perhaps you're used to seeing them every day on the street, or you want to know a little bit about them for next time they call at your door. And I think that there's the more I've thought about it since leaving the Witnesses, there's one teaching which, in particular, which I think really stands out as blatantly flawed, blatantly wrong. And that is this idea that everybody who doesn't agree with Jehovah's Witnesses, in other words, everyone who has the opportunity to become a Jehovah's Witness and doesn't take it, is going to be slaughtered very soon at Armageddon. This is probably the main, one of the most fundamental beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses. It is a doomsday cult that believes that the world around us is going to end at any moment, and when that happens, everyone who doesn't accept the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses is going to be slaughtered. I'm sorry, but those are the beliefs. And the interesting thing is that if you were actually to corner a Jehovah's Witness on this subject, let's say a Jehovah's Witness called on you and you said, do you believe that if I don't accept your beliefs I'm going to be slaughtered? You would get a variety of responses. They would either just refuse to talk to you about it, or they would kind of dance around the subject. And that's perhaps indicated very clearly if you go on the jw.org website, where there is an FAQ section, which I've already said on my videos is extremely misleading. But just one example of how misleading it is can be found where it answers the question, do Jehovah's Witnesses feel that they are the only people who will be saved? And I've actually printed off that particular FAQ because there's a print button if you look at the website. And in answering that question, it says no. Do Jehovah's Witnesses feel that they are the only people who will be saved? No. And it gives a very, very evasive answer. It says, many millions who lived in centuries past and who weren't Jehovah's Witnesses will have an opportunity for salvation. The Bible explains that in God's promised new world there is going to be a resurrection of both the righteous and the unrighteous. Additionally, many now living may yet begin to serve God, and they too will gain salvation. That wasn't the question. In any case, it's not our job to judge who will or won't be saved. That assignment rests squarely in Jesus' hands. So it starts off by saying, well, if you're asking this question as someone who was living during the Middle Ages, if you happen to be accessing jw.org from Victorian or Tudor times, then good news. You were alive before you had an opportunity to learn about Jehovah's Witnesses, and therefore you have a fighting chance. And then it goes on to say, you might be saved if you become a Jehovah's Witness, which again isn't the question. The question is, do Jehovah's Witnesses feel they are the only people who will be saved? And then at the end of the answer, it just parachutes out of the question altogether by saying, well, it's Jesus. It's all in Jesus' hands. The assignment rests squarely in Jesus' hands. Blame it on Jesus. If you get killed during Armageddon, it's not our fault, it's Jesus' fault. So what an atrocious answer, but it typifies, in my view, the kind of shifting and awkwardness and uncomfortableness that a Jehovah's Witness would feel if you were to ask that question, because it is a very it's a question that blows everything wide open and exposes Jehovah's Witnesses for who they are. They're a doomsday cult, and they believe that they alone are right, they alone have the true faith, and anyone who disagrees with them is going to die. That's the gist of it. And to press this home, I wanted to show you an illustration, and this is from the February 15th 2014 Watchtower, so quite a recent illustration. I'll put a link on my website to where you can find this, but you can see there's an angel in the heavens and there's birds circling, and the caption for the illustration, this is Watchtower's caption, says, "Birds will be called on to cleanse the earth." So you're thinking, surely not. Yes, the birds are going to eat you. And I won't read the whole thing, but it says, in poetic language, the psalmist prophesies that the king's arrows are sharp, piercing the hearts of his enemies and making peoples fall before him. A parallel prophecy states, "I saw also an angel standing in the sun," which is what you see there, an angel standing in the sun, "and he cried out with a loud voice and said to all the birds that fly in mid-heaven, Come here, be gathered together to the great evening meal of God, so that you may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of military commanders, and the flesh of strong men, and the flesh of horses and those seated on them." So birds are apparently going to be the bin men of Armageddon. They are going to come along and get rid of all of the rotting remains of everybody, you and I, who have been killed by God for not becoming Jehovah's Witnesses when given the opportunity. It sounds like I'm making this up because it sounds absolutely atrocious, but that is honestly what Jehovah's Witnesses teach. Now, I did want to bring in the governing body a little bit on this video, because the truth is they have had something to say on this subject. In particular, Tony Morris and Garrett Loesch have given talks where they've been extremely graphic about the fate that befalls people at Armageddon who don't become Jehovah's Witnesses. So I'm first going to play you a clip by Tony Morris.
See, I was in Vietnam, a medic in that war. I've seen what happens to humans when they're mangled. You see it on TV and some of that. Well, till you smell human flesh burning from a helicopter crash. People that look like humans, like a hot dog on a grill, blackened and splitting open. I know what's coming at Armageddon. A lot of dead people. A lot of dead people.
So there you have Tony Morris quite clearly projecting from his experience as a Vietnam veteran, which I don't think a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses know, is that he was in the Vietnam War. I've heard that there's going to be an article on Tony Morris in the next Watchtower. We shall see, but maybe that will be discussed in a little bit more detail. But anyway, there you have Tony projecting from his experience and saying, well, you know, I've seen what blackened, charred, burned human remains look like, and we're in for exactly the same thing after Armageddon has passed over. So again, not the most attractive selling point if you're a Jehovah's Witness on one of those literature cards or knocking on someone's door. Do you realise that if you don't accept our literature and don't become a Jehovah's Witness, you can expect to become a human hot dog? They're just not going to say that, are they? And if pushed on that subject, again, it will be interesting to see how they react. But I also want to play you the comments of Garrett Loesch, because Garrett has this theory, which you'll see, about radiation.
And Jeremiah says that the dead will be from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. Or if we look at Zechariah, the prophecy, chapter 14, verse 12, it says there, "And this will be what will prove to be the scourge with which Jehovah will scourge all the peoples that will actually do military service against Jerusalem. But now in the prophecy, this refers to heavenly Jerusalem, where we find the Messianic kingdom. And it says, and that's scary, there will be a rotting away of one's flesh while one is standing upon one's feet, and one's very eyes will rot away in their sockets, and one's very tongue will rot away in one's mouth. Possibly having a figurative fulfillment, but also very possibly having a literal fulfillment. And Jehovah perhaps is going to use radiation to cause this phenomena that people's flesh will rot away as they are standing on their feet. It will be a destruction as mankind has never seen before.
So Gerrit Losch has clearly given an awful lot of thought to the way that people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses are going to meet their end at Armageddon, and he believes that the scourge that's talked about in Zechariah is actually some form of divine radiation that is going to make your flesh melt from your bones. Always makes me think of that scene in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you see that really terrible special effect of the Nazis' face melting. But yeah, he's clearly given this an awful lot of thought, which itself is quite disturbing. But I also, if you think about it, what Gerrit Losch has just said contradicts slightly what Anthony Morris said, because Anthony Morris described charred remains like a hot dog on a grill, which isn't quite the same as flesh kind of dissolving or disintegrating and leaving just the bones. Maybe I'm overthinking this now. So yeah, the governing body is serious about this. It should be clear from just those two clips that I've shown you that the governing body are deadly serious about people who disagree with them, who don't want to become Jehovah's Witnesses, who don't want to have 7 blokes in New York dictating every last part of their lives. They're serious about those people meeting some kind of gruesome fate in the very near future. And this you need to know if you are hitherto completely unaware of what Jehovah's Witnesses teach. Now I'm going to play you one more clip from Gerrit Losch, and this is after everyone has died at Armageddon. You, me, everyone who doesn't agree with Jehovah's Witnesses have all either been charred like a hot dog or they've been exposed to some kind of divine radiation. What happens next? So this is what Gerrit Losch has to say.
When Armageddon will happen after that, it will be a time for liberation for God's people. Not only the destruction of enemies, but liberation and relief in many ways. But there will also be a lot of work to do, because we've mentioned that in Armageddon billions of people will die and they have to be buried. The Bible indicates in the prophecy that there will be groups of people, of brothers and sisters, that will for a long time do nothing else than just bury the dead.
So there's really 2 things to talk about there. The first thing to note is that Gerrit Losch said quite clearly billions of people are going to die. And I'm glad he was honest about that, because when whichever way you look at this situation, there is going to be a slaughter of billions of people. And the reason why Gerrit Losch says that is because there's only 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses, and there's over 7 billion humans on our planet, which is just over 0.1% of Earth's population are Jehovah's Witnesses. So whichever way you cut the cake, there's going to be billions of people dying. So that's the first thing that's worth noting. The second thing is that in this talk, Gerrit Losch says, well, that these people are going to have to be buried. And straight away I'm thinking, well, hang on, if this is, and I'm thinking about, you know, the last, the Return of the Jedi film at the end, where the Empire is defeated and they're partying and they have the stormtrooper helmets and they're kind of banging them like drums. And I often think, well, if these people deserve to die, if they were genuinely worthy of death, why get rid of their skeletons? Why get rid of their remains? If they're not, you know, if their remains aren't kind of a public health hazard, let's say they're completely sterile bones, why get rid of them? You know, what's the shame? Because these people deserve to die. After all, they should be trophies. You know, you should you'd go around to someone's house and you say, "Oh, I like that lamp," and they'd say, "Yeah, that was my Auntie Sarah." You know, that's her skull. So I'm digressing a bit, and it is. I'm probably I'm going to be accused of being juvenile again, but these are ridiculous beliefs. And when you give them the proper kind of scrutiny, they just don't stand up whatsoever. But let's assume that it is the proper thing to do to get these things out of sight. That humans living in perfect paradise conditions don't want to see the remains of their vanquished former opponents. How do you get rid of the remains? And Gerrit Loesch proposes that for a while after Armageddon, there will be teams of Jehovah's Witnesses whose sole job is to bury human remains. And you would think, well, with billions of remains to bury, it makes sense that it would have to be a long time. Now, this kind of contradicts a little bit what was said about birds and animals getting rid of the remains. And I've actually heard that Gerrit Loesch has given a talk more recently. I'm trying to get hold of the recording, but apparently in this latest talk he repeats what he said about the remains needing to be buried, but he also ties in the birds. So I'm interested to see how the divine radiation, the birds and the burying, what the process, what the newly explained process is going to be from Gerrit Loesch.
We do not expect the resurrection to start right after Armageddon, but some time after. Because first of all, the earth has to be cleansed from whatever the war of Armageddon left over. And there will be millions or billions of carcasses of dead people that, will not just be left to rot. And it would not be enough for the birds of heaven to eat their flesh. No, it is possible that Jehovah will, through a miracle, take care of all these carcasses. He has the power to do that. We don't know the details, but somehow the earth will be cleansed before the resurrection starts.
Whichever way you look at it, it is a horribly morbid and morose and disgusting image of the future. It's not something that you would look forward to, even if you were, well, especially if you were on the winning side. Your first taste of paradise will be rotting human remains of people whose crime was to not become Jehovah's Witnesses. And just to drive home the fact that I'm not making this up, I want to read to you from a couple of books. Well, I've got 3 books actually. I'll just mention the third one. But this is the book Worldwide Security Under the Prince of Peace. And it was published in 1986. So I can actually remember studying this book as a child, as a witness growing up. And I want to read to you from page 159 of the Worldwide Security book. If you're a Jehovah's Witness watching this video, look up page 159. And it says, "The mass slaughter on that day of days will be enormous, for the forces lined up on Gog's side in that battle will be tremendous." Gog being, the bad guys, Satan. That will indeed be a global conflict, for no section of the earth will escape the destruction. Moreover, those slaughtered at Armageddon will not be laid in graves with markers to memorialize them. Birds of every sort and beasts of the field will share in the benefits of God's triumph, and at the same time help cleanse the earth of the many carcasses that will lie strewed upon the ground like fertilizer, unlamented, unburied, abhorred by the survivors. Those slain by Jehovah will have earned eternal infamy for themselves. So here we have not just birds, but beasts of the field, which makes a little bit more sense, because I always think there's not going to be enough birds. I mean, sure, there are lots of birds, but there aren't many types of birds that are capable of consuming a human body. I mean, eagle, yes; vulture, yes; condor, yes; blue tit, chaffinch, swallow, not so sure. Being juvenile again. This is the book Isaiah's prophecy, light for all mankind. And let me see, on page 257, let me see. More than that, they are not even deserving of a decent burial, and are fit only to be devoured by ravenous beasts. Thus we read, all you wild animals of the open field, come to eat, all you wild animals in the forest. What are these wild animals going to feast on? The prophecy will explain. In doing so, it may remind us of the fate awaiting those who oppose God at the coming war of Armageddon, whose slain bodies are left for the birds of heaven to devour. So that's, as I say, a more recent book, published in 2001, which I can also remember studying as a witness, Isaiah's prophecy, light for all mankind. And this is an older book here, which someone's very kindly sent me. The nations shall know that I am Jehovah. How? And this goes all the way back to 1971, as does the governing body, if you read on my website. And this actually has a whole section on disposal of war equipment and dead bodies. Don't know whether you can see there. So there's a whole section on it here, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. It kind of goes forwards and backwards a little bit in saying what's definitely going to happen. But how will comparatively few survivors of the war of the great day of God the Almighty at Armageddon be able to bury those slain by Jehovah, who will lie in that day from one end of the earth clear to the other end of the earth? Good question. And after those birds of every sort of wing and the wild beasts of the field satisfy themselves with feeding on the cadavers of Gog's hordes, what will there be left to bury? But if there is anything left to bury, Jehovah will allow for it, to the eternal shame of those losing their lives in Gog's attack. We read, and then it quotes a portion from Ezekiel, which talks about, and I think this is what Gerrit Loesch was talking about when he said that there are scriptural reasons for believing that there will be teams of Jehovah's Witnesses whose sole task is to bury people, because it quotes part of Ezekiel where it says, and all the people of the land will have to do the burying, and it will certainly become for them a matter of fame in the day that I glorify myself, is the utterance of the sovereign Lord Jehovah. And it quotes Ezekiel 39:11-13. But then the next paragraph is a little bit wishy-washy on whether that literally means that that Jehovah's Witnesses are going to have to do burying work. It kind of backs out a little bit. Difficult to understand exactly what it's saying. But hopefully, out of all of the stuff I've read you, I've explained to you how utterly morbid and disgusting and disturbing and psychopathic the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses are when you actually get down to brass tacks. And you know, if you are going to be spoken to by a Jehovah's Witness on the door, or if one approaches you in the street or whatever, I don't think there's any harm in just respectfully saying, Would I be right in saying that if I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness, I will die at Armageddon? Just see what they say. Hopefully you'll get them to think a little bit about what their preaching work is all about, because their preaching work is essentially fear-mongering. Believe what we tell you to believe, or die. Which, should itself say an awful lot about the religion. So I hope this information has been interesting. If you follow my channel, you'll realise that I am doing fairly regular videos on the governing body. There's a new JW broadcasting channel, and I've managed to do 4 videos on that so far. I'm already behind one video on Sam Hurd's talk, on Sam Hurd's episode. I need to cover that, and there's also a leaked elders video featuring Stephen Lett that I need to cover. So it's amazing really how we've gone from a scenario where we hardly heard a peep out of the governing body, and maybe every now and then we'd get a picture of them in the publications, and that was it. And we've gone from that situation to being bombarded with them talking on camera to the point where I can't keep up, so I will eventually get around to doing those videos, and in addition to doing all that, I'm also getting back to writing my book, which I started a couple of years ago, and I'm about a third of the way through, but I really need to finish that. So thank you for your patience. I hope this video has been interesting, and thank you for watching.